All right, that was a review of drawing memory models, but now let's pick up with writing some methods. The first method we're going to write is described here in these java.comments. It's called greater than n, and it returns true if the element at position index, which is right here, is greater than some number n, which is actually called num in our parameter list right here. And these java.comments explain what the parameter should be, as well as what the return value should be. So it's going to return true if, not my array, but if the stored array index, which is the member variable, index, a position index, is greater than num and false otherwise. So what I'd like you to do is take a minute, figure out what should go in all three blanks, A, B, and C. The next 3 slides are going to walk you through that. So pause the video for a second and choose from this list what should go into blank A, blank B, and blank C. All right, so if you figure that out, the first thing you should have probably figured out is that in blank A, we'll want to put the word Boolean. Why Boolean? Because this method is supposed to return true or false, and blank A is where the return type goes. So true or false is a Boolean value. Put Boolean. In blank B goes the type of that first parameter. That's the index of the element that we're going to compare against. Indexes into arrays always have to be integers, so into blank B should go the keyword int. Finally, what goes in blank C? In blank C goes our comparison to determine whether or not the element in stored array is in fact bigger than num or not. So the only one of these that actually does that correctly is C. Why C? Because it takes stored array and it uses these square brackets to access the element at position index and compares it to num. All the others have some problem with them. A and B compare index and num directly, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the element at position index out of the stored array. D is a problem because it doesn't actually get any element out of the stored array. It simply compares the whole stored array to num. And E is a problem because it has two problems. First, it's comparing index to num again, which is not what we want to do. And second, it's trying to use the this keyword before index. You could only do that if index were a member variable, but it's not. It's a parameter. So the right answer here is C. So there's our final method. And now the question becomes, how do we call it? Well, in order to call it, we need somewhere to call it. So let's create a main method where we're going to call this method that we just wrote greater than n. So this is similar to main methods that you saw before. We're going to create a new array play object, pass it in an integer array. It's going to create that copy of the integer array that's in stored array, just like we saw before. I'm not showing the constructor here. And then this last line here is going to actually call that greater than n method. How does it do it? Well, it takes the name of the variable that stores the reference to that object, that array play object we just created. And then the dot means go to that object, find a method called greater than n, and call it with the arguments 2 and 6. So when you do that, what do you get? Does this print true or false? Or maybe there's an error. Go ahead and pause for a second and think about that. Okay, now that you've thought about it, what does this print? Well, let's take a look. So if we pass in 2, then 2 is going to be what goes in for the variable index. So index inside this method is going to get the value 2. Num is going to get the value of the second argument, 6. Now we're going to look at my array. Oh, this is actually an error. Sorry. I hadn't changed this code. I made some modifications. So if you said error, you're probably right. But stored array, if we change it to stored array, now answer the question. So what if we make this change? Well, if we change it to stored array, what is stored array? Well, stored array has just gotten these values here. So stored array is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. Those are the index values. We're going to go to index position 2, which is this element right here. Again, it's actually going to be a different copy of this array in memory, but these are the values that are going to be stored in it, as you saw with that constructor earlier on. So we'll find this value here, which is 10, and compare it against num. It is greater than 6, which is num, so we're going to return true. So in the end, this method will return true. And then it will print true. Now I'm going to make a slight change. I'll make that fix again to my code. So this should be stored array rather than my array. So now I have stored array. And of index like I had before. So now I want to know, what does this method print? All I've done here is I have swapped the order of these arguments. So instead of passing in 2 then 6, I'm going to pass in 6 then 2. So what does this method now print? Take a second. All right, well this time let's look closer at what happened. Again, stored array is going to store an array of these values here, 2, 4, 10, 1, and they're going to be in index position 0, 1, 2, 3. But this time, index is going to get the value 6, and num is going to get the value 2, because the arguments are in the opposite order. So now when I try to access the element at index 6 in stored array, well, what's going to happen? I'm going to go off the end of my array. There is no element 6. So I am going to get an error. And you may remember this is going to be called an array index out of bounds error. It's a very irritating and frustrating error to get. So this is going to cause an error because we're going to try to access the element at position 6. All right, this will pick up in the next part of the video.